Hey there, welcome to the DFS build for Saturday, January 25th. I am Kevin Roberts, going to go over the main slate at DraftKings. It's a big one. It is a nice, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 game slate. It is a doozy, but it could be a fun one too. So that is the goal here. We are going to help you win, pointing out the best plays at each position. And honestly, you're going to really get some value if you head over to our Discord. You can catch the link at the bottom of this video, or it's on our YouTube channel too. And that's just going to help you because we're going to have updated core plays. We're going to have advice going into lock, and you have a full community of people in there trying to win, but also trying to help you win at the same time. People share their lineups. They go over 1v1s and 2v2s and all that stuff. So it's a lot of fun. And it's growing, and everybody's helping each other out. So come in there. It is free. Come in there and join the party if you would like to. Otherwise, you can just keep watching these videos for free. And as long as they are helping you, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel, because that helps us grow and helps the community grow. And that's pretty cool too. If we help you win any money, you can also hit the super thanks below the video as well. All right, let's get into it. We go position by position and highlight the top plays. It's just me today, so I'm not going to go to, and it's a big slate, so I'm not going to waste too much time as I go. And honestly, if you want to elaborate on anything and dive into it more, you can do that in Discord with me and everybody else who ends up being in there. So leading the way is LaMelo Ball with a 58-point fantasy projection. Assuming he's not limited, he's missed a couple of games here. He looks awesome. He looks like one of the best plays of the entire slate. He's facing the Pels, who are very fast. The Pels actually are, I think, like top 5 for sure. No, they're not actually. It's a little surprising. But the Pels do not play defense. That is definitely for sure. So the Pels are bottom 4 in defense. This should be a relatively fast-paced game. No defense on either side. There's no Mark Williams either for the Hornets. So just in general, as long as LaMelo isn't randomly limited, the matchup and the usage are both there for him to be awesome. He was more expensive before, and we would have been on him on a previous slate because his ceiling is so massive. 74-point ceiling. That is pretty darn good. So he looks really good. He looks like the best point guard of the slate. I have a lot of interest in him, especially since across the board, ownership is kind of split on this slate. So he looks good. Let me actually cut it just a point guard only. Okay, there we go. So you can save $600 and go get Trae Young at less ownership. Don't mind him at all. He's facing the Raptors. Trae has not been great in his last 2 games, but the Raptors are a very good matchup. The Raptors are actually the 3rd worst defensive team in the entire league. So I have no qualms going back to the well with him. He has a good pivot off of LaMelo. If I have to just pick one or the other, I still think Ball is the better option. Tyrese Maxey, $200 more than Trae. He looks really good. Nice projection, low ownership, great matchup with the Bulls. The Bulls are not a good defensive team either, but the really nice thing about Chicago is that they are one of the fastest paced teams in the league, 3rd fastest pace in the NBA. So Maxey got there yesterday, I believe, over 50 at 51 fantasy points. He's been very, very good lately with no Embiid. Joel remains out. So while he does have a floor and he's very scoring dependent, Maxey looks like a good play. And just like yesterday, when Taylor really liked him as a GPP option, he is a good play in tourneys, especially at half the ownership of LaMelo. Nice pivot off of him if you want to go there. Still, if I'm paying up in this range, LaMelo is the pick for me. The nice thing is there are other options as we go down. Devin Booker and Scotty Barnes in that next little section there, the next tier. They both look really, really good. Devin Booker pushing a 50-point fantasy projection, gets the Wizards, which is basically the best possible matchup you can ask for. Still only 9K. He crushed against Washington just a few games ago, 54 fantasy points. There are going to be those duds like this against the Cavs, either running into a bad matchup or just kind of deferring to KD every now and then. But for the most part, Devin is just too cheap here. Great spot, and he's usually a pretty aggressive guy with high usage rate. Bradley Beal is back, but he will continue to come off the bench, so I don't think that hurts him or KD. The problem with Booker is he's coming in a little bit chalky here at 24%. I don't mind eating that chalk, really, especially if you get different with the rest of your lineup. But one easy way to leverage that could be to pivot to somebody like Scotty Barnes, or to just go get KD, who looks just as good against the Wizards. Cade Cunningham, not interested there. I'd rather go LaMelo. Obviously, Cade is a very interesting tourney play, still has a solid projection, but the matchup on the road with the Magic is suboptimal. He's the most expensive point guard on the slate, and I just feel like pivoting to LaMelo makes a lot more sense, even though LaMelo is way more owned. So for the sake of just having a guy who has a massive ceiling and won't be owned, yeah, Cade is interesting. But at that price, I think we can get away with not going to him. Ja Morant is probable. He missed last night. I think he missed a couple games. Whatever the case, 9.1K against Utah, that looks pretty good. His projection is not amazing, and he still remains a little bit limited. But for tournaments, I love me some Ja. 9.1K is not too expensive given the matchup and his ceiling. Not a must by any means, not going to be owned, but that is why it makes him a solid tourney play. The matchup is sublime. Stephen Curry against the Lakers, solid matchup, decent enough price, but Curry has not displayed that usual ceiling that we likely. It's a whole lot of ugliness here, or just kind of like barely meeting value. So he does have a ceiling, as we see with some of these big 50-point explosion games. And you have the classic LeBron versus Curry battle. So he could get there. I just don't see the reason for it. We have Barnes and Devin Booker who look better. I kind of skipped by Barnes a little bit. Obviously, he's in a smash spot against the Hawks. Really bad defense, fast-paced environment here. And, he'd be running into possibly Trae Young. So Dyson Daniels is going to have to pick his poison here. Is he going to stop Scotty Barnes or is he going to stop RJ Barrett? I don't know. I didn't watch the last game, so I don't know who Daniels was on. I just know RJ Barrett wasn't good. So my guess was it was him. But either way, if whoever Daniels is on might have a tougher night, and the other guy probably will not. But neither of them smashed. Neither of them smashed last time against the Hawks, anyways. But still, it's such a good spot. Barnes looks really, really good. If you want to keep dropping down, De'Aaron Fox is questionable, but the matchup with the Knicks is not that bad. Obviously, anytime star players go to Madison Square Garden, there's just that narrative of just blowing up. Certainly possible at 8.3K. I don't mind Fox and GPPs at all. DeJounte Murray is fine against the Hornets. Price isn't crazy. You could lump CJ McCollum here at 7.8 and the same price. The only issue is Zion is back for this game. So they're pretty healthy outside of Brandon Ingram being out. So not really super excited to go and race and play Pels. You could certainly pick one as a comeback to LaMelo and any other Hornets you entertain. And you could just stack this whole game too. It looks pretty inviting. 229 total. That's pretty darn good. But I just feel like with everybody mostly healthy for New Orleans, nobody really stands out. Donovan Mitchell, his usage rate and production has been better with no Evan Mobley. Evan Mobley is questionable. So if Mobley's in and the Cleveland starters are like at full strength, I have less interest, but the price is good. And he's been having some really nice ceiling games. He did not deliver last night against the Rockets, and he's had like a couple stinkers here for sure, 28, 16, 29, but they're kind of like all in the middle of like these really nice games too. So for his price point and the ceiling he does provide, I think he's in play, but personally I'm out because I don't love to target guys in brutal matchups. I think the Rockets are not a good matchup. Just don't really want that much to do with this game anyway. It does have a nice 228 total, but I feel like everybody, given the slate size and given the fact that Houston and Cleveland are pretty good at playing defense, I just think that everybody in that game is a little bit overpriced. So Mitchell's a good tourney play. I don't really love that his ownership is ticking up here. I would expect that would drop. So if he's not owned, I think you can play him in tournaments. But just not somebody that is really on my radar. Brunson's projection's terrible. Don't really want him at that projection. Darius Garland's okay at 7.7K. Would probably prefer him to Donovan Mitchell at this point. Doesn't have the same ceiling, but doesn't look like he'll be owned at all. But again, I'm not super interested in Cavs guys. One guy I really like here is Jordan Poole at 6.7K. Obviously, anytime you go with a Wizards player, they can burn you pretty easily. But at 6.7K, pushing a 40-point fantasy projection, in a not so tough matchup with the Suns, I like it quite a bit. That game has a really nice total, like 133 or 233, sorry. And if Washington can keep it close, that could be a bit of a firestorm. Poole versus Devin to end the night. Now, the price point and projection are probably going to have Poole fairly owned, but just consider it's a 9-game slate. Other news could pop. And like in general, I don't think everybody's like, yeah, I gotta play Jordan Poole, right? So Jordan Poole at 6.7K is very, very interesting. I like him quite a bit. CJ, Fred VanVleet, Dyson Daniels, they're okay. I don't have a problem with them. Josh Giddey with some of the issues in Chicago. Let me just go check their injury situation. I know somebody's out. Let's see here. Kobe White is out. Ayo Dosunmu is questionable. So with Kobe out right now, Josh Giddey at 7K flat feels like a bit of a discount. So already I like him a good deal. Philly's not always the best matchup, but with no Embiid there, they're not formidable at all. So I like him at 7K as things stand. But if Dosunmu's also out, then he'd be like really appealing. His projection would spike. He'd also start carrying a lot more ownership too. So it'd be kind of cool if we could not get that news leading into lock, and then you could just kind of go in with Giddey as a solid play, and then if Io is ruled out, he'd be awesome. Malik Monk is just another fair play. Him and Giddey are kind of similar. I definitely prefer those guys over Garland and Mitchell and McCollum and Fred VanVleet. I think the projections are similar, but they're a little bit cheaper. Malik looks fine anyways, but if De'Aaron Fox's questionable tag goes to an out tag, he looks awesome at 7.2K. Austin Reeves a little bit overpriced for a not amazing matchup with Golden State. Plus, when Brow and Braun are there, I just don't want to pay that much for Austin Reeves. Not paying 7K for Colin Sexton because the Jazz, you just never know what they're going to do. In theory, he projects decently, and Memphis is a great game environment. But I would much rather play Keontae George at a worse projection. I really don't want either of them because Memphis, while they play fast, they're very capable of playing very good defense. And also Utah is very capable of being completely inept. So those guys are in play just because that game has like a disgusting, was at 246 total. Like if you want to stack up the game, I can't really argue that. There's nothing wrong with it at all. Jalen Suggs, 7.7K in his return. That's a big no thanks. Tyus Jones at 4.4K. It's the Wizards, and he's only 4.4, so I think he's in play. The only issue is I think his minutes get curved a bit with the return of Bradley Beal. So, what's he been playing here? 26 to 30 minutes is probably the ceiling of his minutes, probably 25 to 27 minutes maybe, which he can get there for sure at this price in this matchup. Just not something I feel like I have to go do, but definitely in play. He looks like a solid value right now. Ty Jerome went off last night. We'd mentioned him, like we said, we liked him okay if Karis LeVert was going to be out, but we certainly didn't know. It's not even updated here, actually. Okay, so the last game isn't even current. My bad. But yeah, so he went off for like 38 real points. He went absolutely berserk. So if LeVert is still out, I think some other guys are out for the Cavs too. Let's go check that out real quick. It's not a good matchup. Like I don't really want to target guys here, but LeVert could be out. Mobley could still be out. Dean Wade is now out. Isaac Okoro is still out. So Ty Jerome at 4.1K is in play. He displayed a ceiling last night, so there's that. If LeVert is in at 4K, there's that. Like they're okay values, just not super excited about them. Lonzo Ball at 4.5K. I don't mind him at all. If you land on him, just because no Kobe White and possibly no Io, so I think he's okay. Nothing wrong with the 4.5K price tag and probably about 25 minutes, maybe a little bit more if Io's out. Luke Kennard was really, really good last night with Ja out, but with Ja probable, I'm not interested in him or really any the Grizzlies on a high level. I think if you get to the Memphis guys at their current price points, there's nothing wrong with it because their matchup with Utah is awesome. But nobody really is going to stand out because everybody is there. Podziemski is back, kind of kills all the Warriors value. I don't want to play a limited Podziemski, but at 3.4K, you could do worse, I suppose, in terms of just pure punts. Scottie Pippen off the board with Ja back. So nobody else is really standing out like you have to play these guys. I think that's it. The only one is like if LaMelo was randomly ruled out again, I suppose we could consider Micic again, but he was bad last night. 33 minutes, and he still didn't get there. Pretty brutal. All right, over to shooting guard we go. Devin Booker leads the way with a 49-point fantasy projection. Paul George played last night, played pretty well. I think he had like 40 fantasy points, 40 or 45, something like that. So he was okay. Really good matchup against the Bulls. So if he is in and not limited, he would be a solid play at 8.2K. I think I still prefer going up for Devin Booker, but you could get Paul George in a just as good matchup at half the ownership. So that certainly is appealing. Levine is in that same game with Paul George. I think he's okay. Same with Donovan Mitchell, Trey Murphy. All these guys are just fine. I think Devin Booker just projects way better and is not that much more expensive. So at shooting guard, if you're not using him at the point, I think he looks really good. Already mentioned Jordan Poole, like him a lot. Desmond Bane with Ja back, good matchup. Price isn't insane. But with Ja back, I just don't see him as a priority. I'd rather just go up here and get Paul George or maybe Levine or Trey Murphy. I think those guys look a little bit more interesting. Jalen Green's price is good and projection solid, but again, Cavs matchup, not something I really want to go do. We can keep going down here to look for some value. Nick Smith Jr., even with LaMelo and Miles Bridges probable to play, Brandon Miller is still out. So Nick Smith is still going to start and still going to get probably about 30 minutes. And that amount of run at this price against the Pels makes him a core play. Feels great, doesn't it? Always going back to Hornets as core plays. But he looks great, unless like other really, really amazing value opens up, or unless we hear he doesn't start. I'm just going to keep firing him up at 4.6. He has been getting it done. Let's see. 30 minutes, 25, and he's been solid. Well, yeah, then last game he didn't really deliver. But actually, let me see something real quick. Let's see where it was. I know that's not current because I know he hit. I know he hit yesterday. Yeah, he had 34 fantasy points yesterday. So the last game is not populating right now. So don't take those game logs as gospel. But yeah, he had 34 fantasy points last game. He's had 24 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4. So he's going to be involved. Obviously, he's going to lose a little usage or a lot of usage with LaMelo back, but he still looks like a really good value at 4.6. There's also Grady Dick at 4.5. He's liable to not play the 4th at all. But he was solid last time against the Hawks. He's still only 4.5K, still a great matchup. I'm totally fine with going to him as well. Not into Grayson Allen with Bradley Beal back. Just don't see the point of doing that. If you don't want Grady Dick, you can save $500 and go get Bruce Brown at 4K flat. Very similar plays. He's just going to play a few less minutes. Shooting guard. Let's see what else really pops. Nothing really crazy. Tim Hardaway Jr. is starting and getting minutes. You can play Tim Hardaway Jr. if you want. I'm not going to do it. He's very thin play on the road against the Magic. I think it's gross, but in the name of GPPs, you certainly can. Same thing with like Jordan Hawkins, 3.2K against the Hornets. He'll get 20 plus minutes even with Zion back, probably. Like these are things you can do. I would try to make decisions that aren't like stretching me super thin. And if you're going to make a punt, like make a punt that makes sense, a few days ago when Nick Smith Jr. was 3.2K, that was a very obvious punt. I was fully on board with that. Even yesterday with Micic, he didn't work out, but 3.4K Micic looking at 30 plus minutes against the Grizzlies. No, not the Grizzlies. Who'd they face? They faced the Blazers. Like that's a good spot. He had 12 points in 33 minutes, but he also had 6 turnovers. Disgusting. And no rebounds. So it just is what it is. Like at that price point, though, a guy running the offense is like the only point guard. That's a good play. Something like Jordan Hawkins or Tim Hardaway Jr. It's just a very thin play. So you can take those chances. Just know that it is a lot riskier than somebody who is looking at a big role. All right, to small forward to go. Scotty Barnes has the best projection. He looks great. Nothing bad to say about Scotty Barnes. Cheap price, honestly, for him. With this projection in this matchup, so I like him quite a bit. He has a little bit less ownership than Devin Booker, who has the same exact price. So you can certainly pivot off of Booker there if you'd like to. I don't mind pairing them either because their prices are so nice. Already talked about these other guys up top. RJ Barrett, the bane of my existence recently. He's had what was it against the Hawks, and who else did he face? I don't know if this is current. Yeah, it was the Hawks. I did play him against Orlando, even though Orlando isn't really the best matchup. So maybe that was just my mistake there. But his issue in that game was foul trouble. He had 35 fantasy points in 28 minutes, so he really wasn't that bad, all things considered. And then last game against the Hawks, smash spot, only took 9 shots for no reason. Maybe Daniels was on him. I don't know. He had 5 turnovers and had 30 fantasy points in 36 minutes. It was brutal. Even though that happened, RJ Barrett at 7.8K still projects pretty well, and the matchup is awesome. Assuming Dyson Daniels doesn't lock him up and the guy isn't super timid, shooting 9 times, RJ Barrett, again, looks really good. So he's very interesting for sure. I mean, 1.2K cheaper than Scotty Barnes. I think he's a solid tournament play. Trey Murphy and all those pals, they just take a little bit of a usage hit with Zion back, so they're fine plays. They're just not priorities for me. Let's see, we start to lose projection value quite a bit as we go down here. Svi is kind of, I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name. He is popping a bit in the projections because he's been a high usage guy for Utah for some reason, and Memphis is a great matchup. So if the game stays close and he gets out there for 25 plus minutes, I think he's an okay try at 4.6. If I was comparing him directly to Nick Smith Jr., I'm going to prefer Nick Smith Jr., but also so will everyone. So if you want to get different and don't want to play Nick Smith Jr., that's one guy you could pivot to. Also talked about Grady Dick. And there's also like Rui Hachimura. There's also Azur Thompson. Like there are other guys to play. You don't have to play Nick Smith, even though he's going to be in my core probably, when I update it for the end of the night. But you certainly can do that. You certainly can pivot away from chalk like that, because sometimes the chalk is not going to hit. It's just the way it works. Nobody else down here like stands out to me big time. I will consider the Cavs guys are like Max Strus and George Niang, just because there's no Dean Wade and Evan Mobley may miss again. Then obviously Okoro remains out. So if that is the case, then one of those guys is probably going to hit. Right now, my lean is probably going to be Niang, just because he's only 3.6K. And Strus has been really bad. Obviously, that can change, but the matchup isn't great anyways. So I'd rather, if I'm going to get exposure to that game, I'd rather do it via somebody who's going to help me save some cash. And Niang looks really solid at 3.6K. Probably that probably does it for now. All right, power forward. LeBron James has the best projection at 53 fantasy points going against the Warriors. Warriors, as I've said before, not really the best matchup, but it has been slowly changing a little bit lately because they've just been falling apart, it seems. He looks good, 9.9K. Don't have a problem with LeBron. Not a priority spend for me. I'd rather go get LaMelo, or I'd rather drop down to guys like Devin or Scotty. And in that same price range, I prefer Kevin Durant or Cat. But he does have a better projection than KD, so it's worth noting. But KD's got the better matchup, and he's $600 cheaper. So I think they're both very good. I just prefer KD. Banchero continues to be a little bit limited. Our projections have him up to 34 minutes here against the Pistons. That looks pretty good. His raw points projection here is pretty good. Like, Banchero looks like a good play once again. If he can actually get 34 minutes, he should smash. So Banchero is a really, really good GPP play tonight. Will it actually work out ever? I don't know. It hasn't. His first game back in 26 minutes, he had 54 fantasy points. How many games? 4 in a row before he even got 40 again. The last game he got 29. So he's not been very good. But we know he can be. We know he has a massive ceiling. We know he's super involved usually, and the Pistons are not a very formidable matchup. So at 8.5K, he remains a very good tournament play. Zion Williamson, sure, a solid tournament play, no doubt about it, but he's like been missing games due to conditioning reasons. Wrecked against the Jazz, but he only did 22 minutes, played 23 the game before. So, like, how limited is he going to be? And, like, in that amount of time, he's got to absolutely crush. He certainly could against the Hornets, but at 8.8K, I don't really want to do that dice roll. I would rather go get KD for 500 more, or I'd rather pivot to Banchero, or I'd rather, go down and save here or something. I don't love it. He's way more limited than Banchero at this point, so I think he's the worst play. Certainly a GPP play, just not one I'll be doing today. JJJ, not as exciting with Ja back. Josh Hart is questionable if he's in. He looks good against the Kings. Nothing wrong with him whatsoever. He just seems like super safe, like every time, and nobody wants to play him. So if nobody wants to play Josh Hart, not even 3% owned. That's super interesting to me. Like, all the Memphis guys are going to pop a little bit and possibly be owned because they're facing the Jazz. I would deem that game as a major blowout risk with them healthy, though. Tobias is just okay at 5.8. No problem there. DeAndre Hunter is questionable. Wouldn't be super into him. Instead, I'd be looking at other Hawks guys. Also, Jalen Johnson's out. So he would be a decent play with Jalen Johnson out if he's in at 6K. Don't hate him. Don't love him. It's just kind of whatever. Miles Bridges is solid at 7.4 against the Pels as long as he's in and not limited. Wiggins is questionable, so that could open things up for other Warriors. He himself is an okay play against the Lakers with, I think, Draymond is still out. Let me just double check. Yeah, Kuminga's out, Draymond's out, and Wiggins is in. He's probable, so Wiggins should be back. So at 6.3, I think he's a fair play for sure against the Lakers, especially with all those other guys out. He crushed Lakers last time, 45.5 fantasy points. So I think the projections are kind of timid here on Wiggins, but I would bet he would go over that projection. So he is a pretty interesting play for sure. He's not going to be owned at all. No Drummond, no Embiid. So Yabusele looks good at 5.5K. The Bulls are an amazing matchup. Projections kind of light here. But he should get all the run he can handle because those guys are not there. Kyle Kuzma is just fine at 6K. If that game stays close, he could exceed those minutes and overall projection. Sarr, I keep saying Sarr is limited and maybe you shouldn't play him, but he also keeps just getting it done. He gets like 30 to 33 fantasy points like every time. So I think he's fine. If you want to play him, I don't have a problem with it. Chris Boucher, there's no Kelly Olynyk for the Raptors. So Chris Boucher at 3.2K, not safe, but a pretty good punt. Should get about 20 minutes, and he projects really well because he's a really good per-minute guy. So at 3.2, do not have a problem with that whatsoever. I already talked about Niang. Okogie could get a little bit more run because Cody Martin is out. Miles Bridges and LaMelo Ball being back might negate that, but Mark Williams is also out, so I don't really know how they're going to do this. I don't know if they're going to go small. I don't know if the Pels want to go small because Zion is back now. It's a guessing game for sure, but Okogie does stand to get, a decent amount of minutes here at 3.1K. I do not think he's the worst punt in the world. He was really good last night when Cody Martin went out, but like I said, LaMelo and Bridges coming back could kind of offset that. But at 3.1, I think he's a viable punt. Probably about it. Everybody else feels awfully thin unless we hear some crazy news. All right, center to wrap it up. Anthony Davis and Cat have very similar projections. So when you look at price, and everything, Cat just looks like the better play. Certainly, you play Anthony Davis. He's projecting to be unowned, and he has a top 3 overall fantasy projection on the slate. So definitely a good GPP play. But Cat's not like crazy owned, so I think Cat is just the better play. Sabonis is getting completely overlooked here. Pales in comparison when looking at him and Towns in terms of projection, but he's not going to be owned, and very similar price. And he has like 70 as a ceiling, truly. So I would not be totally shocked if Sabonis broke the slate. Definitely should be in your player pool. Not a priority as things stand, because Cat is the safer stud to go with. But Sabonis being unknown is always something we should look at, unless there's just like a guaranteed, like Jokic or Giannis up top that we feel better about. I do feel better about Cat and Brow, but Sabonis is interesting when overlooked. Vucha 8.1K against the Sixers without their top 2 centers. That's pretty good. He projects awesomely. Don't have a problem with him at all. Don't really understand the JJJ ownership with them at full strength, but it's just matchup based at this point. I think he's okay, like I said, just not really going on my way to play Memphis guys. Jakob Poeltl looks awesome at 6.4. Onyeka Okongwu also looks really good at 6.2. They're facing each other. Last time they faced each other, Onyeka went nuts. I think he had like 46 fantasy points. And Poeltl, I think he also did well. Onyeka had 46, and Poeltl had 42. So yeah, it could just be another repeat where these guys just eat. So they feel a little bit underpriced, honestly. Poeltl's got the way better projection, safer minutes, but there's no Jalen Johnson, so I wouldn't be shocked if Onyeka benefited from that quite a bit. Jalen Duren, always a good GPP play, but not sure tonight on the road against the Magic is the spot I'm going to do it. Only other guy I really want to highlight, well, first of all, I want to say, not sure I'd play Messi because there's no Mark Williams for him to go up against, and Zion's back. So when Zion's back, don't really have a lot of interest in Messi. Wendell Carter is an okay value, but I think Goga might be back. Goga is, no, he still has a concussion issue. He did not participate in practice. So if Goga is out, I think you can play Wendell at 6-1. I just think I'd rather play Onyeka and Poeltl. Nick Richards is the guy I wanted to highlight. 5.1K. He's been really inconsistent due to like blowouts lately, but the Wizards are the best possible matchup for a big. So I think he looks like a really, really good play at 5.1. And it'll be interesting to see where his ownership is before lock, because right now he's not projecting for major minutes, and his overall projection is not blowing anyone away. And 5.1K for an inconsistent guy is not something people are going to race to go play. But he looks like a really good play if you don't want to go for like an Uber punt or pay all the way up at center. Or you can just pair him with whoever else you like to. Nobody else here. I already mentioned Boucher. Nobody else here like stands out big time. I guess Edey, if they're going to give him minutes. How did he do yesterday? I know he got off to a nice start. Like I haven't been on Edey because they just keep jerking his minutes around. He did play 24 minutes at 39 fantasy points last night. So if we're going to have a shot at that again, 3.8K Edey is very, very interesting for sure. The only other guy I'll mention is Musa Diabate. I think I'm pronouncing that right, but probably not. With no Mark Williams, he's probably going to get a good amount of run. He might even start. So at 3K flat, he certainly needs to be in consideration. I think these projections were not quite updated for the Mark Williams news. They're just kind of like semi-updated, like for Mark Williams to possibly be out. But now that he's out, I would not be shocked if Diabate's minutes go more to like 25 to 30 and his projection pushes closer to 25. So if that's the case, he looks really good at 3K. And depending on where his final projections land, he may end up being a core play. I still would need him to start, but he would look really, really good. All right, that is going to do it for us. We'll see what other news drops. Before I sign off here, I'm going to refresh my Underdog NBA Twitter feed to see if anything else came out. Nope, nothing big came out. Let's see. What's the big one we're monitoring at this point? I guess Evan Mobley is certainly one of the big ones. I think Trae Young is still technically questionable. There's some probable guys that just, you never know, like LaMelo and Ja, you never know until they're officially in. Sometimes they'll just yank them back out. I think DeJounte Murray is questionable. So if DeJounte were out, that would change things a little bit with how I perceive the Pelicans. I would have a lot more interest in McCollum and Trey Murphy for sure if that were the case. And then De'Aaron Fox is probably the other big one. Fox is questionable, and if he's out, Malik Monk and Sabonis would look a lot better. But of course, if that's the case, then also they're gonna pick up a little bit more ownership too. So just keep that in mind. Going into the slate. All right, as far as like flag plant on the slate, like I mean, some of the guys I like the most honestly have a lot of ownership. Right now, though, like LaMelo at 10.2K is the best projecting stud. I don't know how I go away from that on this slate, especially since there's a lot of value opening up. I have no problem if he ends up being chalky. I don't really have a problem eating that chalk. He looks really, really good. Really like Devin Booker, but if he's going to be mega owned, I don't mind pivoting to KD there. Similar projection, same matchup, similar price. Don't mind that at all. And then Ben Caro, if his minutes are really going to tick up like that, 8.5K for his projection, he looks really, really good. So yeah, that's probably where I'm at. I also like Cat a lot too. I do not mind either, especially if you're going to do a lot of lineups. I do not mind just going center with Onyeka and Pirtle facing off. But the way things are shaping up with so many high upside studs on this slate, I think like doing something with Nick Smith Jr., Musa Diabate, I think that might be something I look at. Maybe Niang, maybe a little bit of stars and scrubs, but the upper mid range looks awesome. So certainly a lot of ways to go on this slate. So don't necessarily handcuff yourself to one thing, but hopefully you can get things started with our core plays, which we'll finalize before lock. All right, hopefully we helped you out here. If we did, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and come join our Discord. Thanks for watching, and good luck.